What I want to do today is really just introduce myself so you can get to know a little bit more about me, and then I'm going to introduce you to the relationship loop and why it's important to have this idea in your head when you're thinking about making radical healthy changes in your love life. So firstly, a little bit about me. I'm a psychologist with over 30 years experience. I've worked with a variety of different client groups, so from children, adults, all the way up to elderly individuals who are suffering from things like dementia, mental health of all different types, and pretty much everything in between. So about, let me say, 10 years ago, I came to Spain, and one of the things I had to do was retrain in clinical hypnotherapy. And up to that point, I pretty much avoided any sort of trauma-based work, mainly because I was a bit concerned that if I took on those types of clients, that maybe I wouldn't be able to do very much to help them. It felt a bit like I was pulling the plaster or the sticking plaster back, but what came out I wasn't really equipped to deal with. When I started doing clinical hypnotherapy, though, what quickly happened was I started to get clients female clients predominantly, who were coming to me with anxiety, trauma, and often relationship issues. And what I noticed was a lot of these women had things happen to them throughout their life, but predominantly starting in childhood, where they picked up certain patterns of behaviour which then made them act in certain ways in their adult life. And what happened was that they were picking up methods of interacting with, say, the opposite sex or picking partners that they had learned as children. And often that was because something was happening in the home that wasn't potentially a very good role model. So maybe there was issues between mum and dad, maybe there was mental illness, maybe there was an addictions issue. So what happened was these ladies then grew up, and then when it became time to pick a partner, often they were playing with not a full deck in terms of how to be really sure that the people that they were choosing to get involved with are the right person for them. So often then what I would find is they'd start to come to me because they were unhappy about their relationships, their relationships as adults. And it came in all sorts of forms. It came in people who were exiting abusive relationships, and that could have just been psychological, emotional, or up to the point of physical or sexual abuse. So the whole gamut. But something very untoward was happening in the power dynamic within those relationships that made the women kind of concerned that, maybe something that they weren't quite aware of or how to deal with, how to cope with, was potentially going to go and follow them into their next relationship. I also started to work with women who were further along in the trajectory, who were in what I would call a difficult divorce, which traditionally was called high conflict divorce. Now, the reason I don't use high conflict is because I have a specific reason for, in those cases, because we're generally talking about an individual. My clients would predominantly be the women who have been victimized in that relationship, and the men that they've been dealing with and they're trying to divorce with are particularly difficult individuals. So it's not conflict in the way that we would normally think about it in terms of two parties, arguing with each other. It was all the problems were really coming from one source. But again, what I found was these women, when I did a little bit of digging, what we had is a similar type of background, a similar type of history, and they were taking those ideas, they were taking those patterns of behaviour forward into choosing their partners, their marriage partners. And now at the end of the relationship and the divorce, they were kind of facing the consequences of those sort of not so great choices, shall we say. Now, none of these women were making these choices because they had any great desire to have difficult relationships or pick bad partners, and they certainly weren't attractive to these particular individuals. It wasn't that, a lot of them were thinking, am I doomed to do this forever? Am I a magnet for these sorts of men? And the answer to that is no. What it is there's certain abilities, certain capacities, or if you want a certain rule book that the ladies hadn't been taught as children. So they were playing at a disadvantage, and there's definitely some individuals who are out there who will take advantage of those perceived weaknesses. So I began to work with these women, and what I found was they were really what I would call a relationship loop. They were stuck in this loop, and it would be that they would go from dating to something serious like marriage, and then that would go then through into divorce or breakup, and then what you would get is back into dating. Now the problem was that a lot of these women would be in these quite unsatisfactory relationships. So they'd be in it, whether it was just the boyfriend or if it was more, more serious and in a marriage. They would go to the breakup, but they didn't learn anything. So what would happen is they were almost kind of preempted to go out and do the same thing again. Now, the good news is, at any part of that cycle, the patterns of behaviours or those rules that you weren't taught can be learned. This is something that's about learning. This isn't something that's intrinsic to us. So if you've come from a childhood where maybe things weren't so great in your family, and that's a lot of people, then those rules that may be in the more stable households, you didn't get those. You didn't get to hear those rules, and they can be taught. And that's pretty much what I do. So when you're thinking about the relationship loop, it's really about that it's not discrete types of processes. It runs into each other, and it goes continually round and round. And what you really need to be thinking about is, okay, if you're starting to recognize that there's a problem here in your relationship, whatever part you're in, whether it's dating, whether you're in a committed relationship, whether you're married, or whether you're at the breakup point, then perhaps it's about time to start to think, what can I do that's different so I can ensure that the same thing doesn't happen again? And those types of techniques, those types of strategies are what we're going to talk about over the following weeks. And obviously that's in the course that I'm going to be launching. That's going to be all of it taken together so that I can take the ladies through what it is that they need to know to kind of make sure that you're protected as much as possible from picking the wrong partner, settling for the wrong partner, because really what this is all about is being able as growing wonderful women to find the love that you deserve, and that means going out there and knowing what you're looking for. So thank you, and it's been lovely to introduce myself. So